Hi, I'm Tia. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to share with you all of the books that I read during the month of December. I did participate in two different readathons during the month of December. I did the Cloak and Dagger Christmas that was created by Kate Howe, and I ended up reading 3 mysteries for that one, which means that I was an amateur sleuth. I wanted to get all the way to Sherlock Holmes level, but I just didn't make it. And then on Create Your Own Holiday Adventure was a readathon that I co-hosted with Chloe from Always Booked, Sarah from The Bookish Knitter, and Bree from Falling for Romance. On that one, I ended up doing 2 of the paths. I wanted to do all 4, but I just didn't make that either. I ended up completing the Kid at Heart path and the Holiday Homebody path. I'll pop that in there right here for you to be able to see which 2 paths I finished. I wanted to be able to do all 4, but I just didn't make it to all of the prompts in time. So now let me just jump into everything that I read. I read 26 things. Not all of them were full-length novels, so it's not like I read a ton of pages in December, but I do have a lot of books to talk about, so I'm going to try to be as succinct as possible, but sometimes I can get carried away. I'm going to try not to let that happen. Okay, the first thing I'm going to talk about is all of the physical Christmas books that I read during the month. So my favorite one that I read this month was A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This was actually a reread for me. Me and my oldest daughter read this at the same time and were able to talk about it. And this is one of my favorite, well, it probably is my favorite Christmas book, you know, the quintessential Christmas story that I think everyone should read at some point in their life. I'm sure you all know the story about Ebenezer Scrooge and how he is visited by 3 different ghosts, and he is able to see his life the way he's been living and realize that he wants to make a change in himself. This is full of quotable moments. It has been remade hundreds of times, and I love this story so much. I definitely recommend it. If you haven't read it already, please, please, please read it next Christmas. It's so wonderful. Then I read a whole bunch of Geronimo Stiltons with my kids. So every December we wrap up 24 books, Christmas books, and we let our kids open one each day. And they are generally the same books from year to year, but this year, our kids are getting older, and so I changed out some of the books. I took out like some of the younger board books and, just the younger books that they are not interested in anymore. And I put in a whole bunch of Geronimo Stilton Christmas. So I ended up reading these with the kids. We sort of passed them back and forth between us. And some of them I read out loud to them as well. So I don't have a ton to say about all of these. I'll just show you which ones they were, but I read A Very Merry Christmas, Christmas Catastrophe. I read this beautiful book with sprayed edges. This is the Geronimo Stilton retelling of A Christmas Carol. This was probably my favorite out of the bunch because, like I said, I just love this story. Then I read The Christmas Toy Factory and Merry Christmas Geronimo. All of these feature Geronimo at Christmas time as he gets into different hijinks. There's usually always something that goes wrong, but he usually ends up learning some sort of Christmassy message. With the exception of A Christmas Catastrophe, this one was a little bit different, which probably made it one of my favorites. This one isn't really that much about Christmas. I don't know why it is called Christmas. It takes place at a ski resort, and he ends up getting in an accident while he is out skiing and has to spend a really long time recovering in the hospital. And it has a whole bunch of information about hospitals and hospital workers, and I just found that to be so interesting. I think that if you have a child who is going to have to spend time in the hospital because of something that they need to have done, or because of a family member that needs to be in the hospital, that this could be really helpful. So yeah, I definitely recommend all of the Geronimo Stiltons that I've read. But this one and this one were definitely my 2 favorites from the month of December. I read Almost Midnight by Rainbow Rowell. So this is a bind-up of 2 festive short stories. One of them is one that I had already read because it was in a different bind-up of YA short stories. But the other one was new to me, and this little compilation is illustrated by Samini Blocker, which I thought was so cute. The illustrations in here were just adorable. They aren't on every page, but yeah, they were a lot of fun. So this I ended up giving 4 stars overall. The first story is called Midnights, and it's about these 2 best friends, and you get a glimpse of all of their New Year's Eve for several years building up to the final one that's in the story. I don't want to spoil it for you, but yeah, it was really cute. That was the one I had read before, and so I, sort of already knew it was going to happen. But the second one, that was called Kindred Spirits, is about this girl who is sort of camping out in line to see the newest Star Wars movie. And it was a lot of fun. I think because I really love Star Wars, and I can relate to her. I mean, I've never camped out for Star Wars, but I did wait in line a really long time for the most recent Star Wars movie, even though we had bought our tickets in advance. Yeah. So yeah, it was just really, really cute, and I would recommend this if you are into cutesy YA stories and you want something festive to read. I think that this is still good to read in January if you're interested in picking it up, or save it for next December too. It's a cute book. The first book that I actually read in December was Mistletoe Murder by Leslie Meyer. This is the first in the Lucy Stone mystery series. This counted for Cloak and Dagger and for Create Your Own Holiday Adventure. As read on the cover, and for Cloak and Dagger, I can't remember what I used this for, but anyway, this follows Lucy Stone, who works at this mail order company. She answers phones and takes orders from like a catalog or whatever, and a man turns up murdered in the parking lot, and she becomes involved in the mystery, trying to figure out who killed him, because she's actually the one who found his body, of course. But so this is set in the 80s or 90s. I can't remember the exact year, and you can definitely tell. I don't really know if this stood the test of time. The dialogue was pretty cheesy. The characters were just signed up. I don't know. It just wasn't that great. Okay. I don't know what else to say about it. It wasn't terrible. I think I gave it 3 stars. It was just very mediocre. It was kind of boring. I wasn't that interested in the characters or the mystery, and I don't plan on continuing on in the series, which is sort of disappointing because I was looking forward to this, and I thought that all of these mysteries are set around different holidays, and I thought that would be so much fun to read a mystery, related to each holiday as I went along, but I just don't see myself committing to this long of a series whenever the books are just this mediocre. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I read Green Glass House by Kate Milford. So this is a middle grade mystery that also counted for both of my readathons. It has snow on the cover, and it takes place in a hotel. That was one of the prompts for Cloak and Dagger Christmas. And this one I had such high hopes for. I've had this for a couple of years. I've heard nothing but great things about this one. And it was definitely whimsical and very atmospheric. I would say that that was probably one of its strong suits, was the setting, and the characters were really quirky, and I enjoyed, all their different quirks and how the different puzzle pieces fit together. But I think maybe because I had such high expectations for this, that is why I felt a little bit let down by it. The other thing is that this has a really strong role-playing game element to the book, which is just not really my thing. I am not into role-playing games. The 2 main characters take on these different personalities, different roles, and they sort of are them throughout the whole entire book, and I just didn't relate to that at all. I think that might have been like my biggest struggle with the book. I would have preferred if they had just been themselves throughout the whole entire book, if that makes sense at all. Other than that, I did enjoy the mystery, although I will say that I thought that it was pretty predictable, and I did see a lot of the twists coming before they actually happened. But I am not the intended audience for this. My daughter read this at the same time as me, and she didn't see any of the twists coming. She didn't figure out any of the mystery before it was revealed in the book. So I would say that for a middle grade student, that this is absolutely perfect. And I mean, probably for older people as well. It's just that I had such high expectations for this that it just didn't meet them, and I ended up being disappointed by this book. I read Catching Christmas by Terry Blackstock this month, and this is the one that I was probably the most disappointed with this month, and I'm a little bit worried that I might end up running on too long about this one, so I'm going to try to keep it succinct. This is a book that follows an elderly woman whose only living relative is her granddaughter. Her granddaughter is a lawyer and she works a ton. She's trying to make enough money to be able to take care of her grandmother's needs and her own needs. And she just doesn't have a ton of time to be around for her grandmother. And her grandmother really needs a lot of care, honestly. At the beginning of the book, the granddaughter has hired this cab driver to come and pick up the grandmother to take her to a doctor's appointment because she can't be there herself because she has to work. So you're alternating perspectives between the cab driver and the granddaughter. And this is another one that I felt like I had really high expectations for, and they just didn't meet them. So here's the reasons why I didn't like this book. I felt like the writing was incredibly basic. Like it wasn't bad writing, it just wasn't that great. It was very, very basic and almost stilted, I would say. And then the two main characters were incredibly like cardboard cutout characters. They didn't really have any personalities at all. Like the only characteristics that we found out about them was like the guy is a grumpy cab driver who used to own a restaurant, and the girl is a lawyer whose only living relative is her grandmother, and she works all the time. That was really all that we learned about them. I mean, you might learn some tidbits here and there, but it was nothing to make you feel like you really knew them and really pulled for their characters. Like I didn't feel anything for those two characters at all. Then the third thing would be that nothing really happens in this book. It doesn't really have much of a plot at all. So those three things together would be enough for me to give it only 3 stars. If I'm going to enjoy a book, if there's not really going to be a plot, the writing either has to be really good or the characters have to be really good. There has to be something that I am pulling for. Like, why am I reading this story? But it didn't have any of those 3 things. So that was enough just to make it like a mediocre 3-star book. But put on top of that, that I felt like emotionally taken advantage by this book. So let me see if I can explain this. There are books where people are sick and they die, and it's part of the story. It makes sense for the story, and it just works, and you don't feel taken advantage of because it was a natural progression of the plot. But I feel like this book was written specifically about this ailing elderly woman in a way to make play of people's emotions. Like that is the driving force of this book. So either people who have experienced this type of, taking care of an ailing elderly family member, like a parent or a grandparent, are going to feel so upset by this book. And so you're either playing on that emotion of something that people have already experienced, or you're playing on the fear of that happening to one of your family members or yourself. And I know people probably won't agree with me, but there was a scene in this book, it was right at the beginning, where the cab driver took the elderly grandmother, to her doctor's visit. And he went to check her in and, told them like, she's hard of hearing, you are going to have to say her name really loud or come and get her. And he leaves her there by herself, this older woman. And he comes back to check on her because he can't stop thinking about whether or not she got into her appointment, like hours later. And she has been sitting in the same spot the entire time. I cannot tell you how upsetting that was to me. And yes, I'm sure that happens. But I went through like the slow dying of my father in a hospital. And for some writer to take advantage of those feelings, like, it really made me angry, okay? And yes, I know that people die and elderly people die, and I have read about it in a ton of different books. I wish I could explain what the difference is. When it's part of the plot, the characters are built up, you care for all of them, the storyline is working, and you know, it's a natural progression of the story, then that is one thing that I can get behind and feel for. But when it is something that is just, it's the only driving force of the entire book is the fact that this grandmother is ailing. And, you know, I don't want to spoil the book for you, but anyway, that's the driving force of the book. I felt like that was the whole entire point of the book. It was very, very depressing. The only hopeful parts happened at the very, very end. And honestly, the author's note at the end was the best part of this entire book, where she sort of explains why she decided to write this book. But the book itself was not good for me. Oh, I know that a lot of people love this book, and honestly, maybe I'm dead inside. I don't know. I just really felt taken advantage of by the writing in the story. I probably didn't explain that very well, and I'm sorry. Then I read 3 NetGalley books, which I felt pretty good about this month. The first one was The Little Christmas Shop on Nutcracker Lane by Jamie Admons. This is a book about a girl who works on this like Christmas shop row, basically, that only opens seasonally. It's been her dream to always work there, and she does like Christmas crafts and stuff and sells them there. But the shops are not doing very well. They have sort of this new administration who has been cutting their budgets, and they're worried that the whole place is going to shut down. And there is a romance in this book, and it's very heartwarming and has a lot of feel-good moments, but it honestly became a little bit repetitive after a while. I felt like a lot of the conversations and the things that were happening sort of just got recycled over and over. And the things that I think were supposed to be a surprise were not surprising at all. It just became very predictable, and I think I ended up giving this one 3 or 3.5 stars. It wasn't a bad read. Like I said, there are a ton of Christmas feels in this book. Like, if you were looking for a book that is packed with Christmas feels, it's this one, because there was Christmas movies, there was Christmas baking, there was Christmas decorations. They did everything in this book. It just became like, it just sort of dragged on too long, I think, for me. Then I also read Christmas at Fireside Cabins by Jenny Hale through NetGalley, and this one, I have so many books by Jenny Hale because I don't know why, but I have a ton on NetGalley by her, and I have some on my shelf because I've heard great things about her. But this book was so boring. Oh my gosh, this book was so boring. It took me forever to read this book, and this was just, the writing was boring, the characters were boring, the plot was boring, everything about this book was so boring. It follows this girl who, her and her 3 friends at Christmas time, they always go on like a little excursion together, and this particular Christmas time they go to like these cabins in Tennessee is where the book takes place, and her friends end up sort of like ditching her, and she ends up there alone. She meets a local guy, and you know, stuff happens. Really boring stuff. I'm telling you, this book was so boring, and I'm really hoping that the other books I have by Jenny Hill were not this boring. This book, yeah, it was boring. Okay, then I read Holiday Home Run by Priscilla Oliveris, and this one was a shorter book that I had through NetGalley, but this one was a lot of fun. I really ended up enjoying this one. This book follows an event planner who lives in Chicago, and she is originally from Puerto Rico, but she wants to move her life to Chicago and focus on event planning there, and she's scared to tell her family back in Puerto Rico because she's afraid that they won't approve. But she ends up meeting this ex-baseball player while she's planning this huge Christmas event in Chicago, and it was just so sweet. I mean, there was a lot of Christmas stuff, and both of the characters were just wonderful. I really enjoyed my time with this book. I just fell in love with the writing, and I'm looking forward to trying more out by this author. Then in December, I read a whole bunch of other novellas on my Kindle, and I'm going to try to tell you about those as quickly as I can because I know this video is getting long. I read The Boss Who Stole Christmas by Janet Aston, and this one was super cute at the beginning. It follows 2 people who work for a toy company, or a toy factory, a toy company, I guess you would say. And they have to go on this business trip together, and she has always hated this guy, her boss. For what reason, I'm not really sure. That wasn't very clear, but in her mind, she hated this guy, okay? At first, it was super cute, and there was like a scene with like her and her sisters, and I thought their banter was a lot of fun. But then they go on this business trip, and things just flip, and they just immediately do some stuff together, and I was uncomfortable with it. I felt like the power dynamic was off, and I didn't really get the whole hate to infatuation so quickly. Yeah, so it just sort of devolved for me, and I ended up not really liking this one. There are 2 other books in this series, but I'm not going to read the rest of them. Then I read Gnome for Christmas by Celia Kinsey. This was one that I read for the Cloak and Dagger readathon, and I think I also used this for Create Your Own Holiday Adventure too, because this has a main character who's over 30. And this is a really, really short book that was on Kindle Unlimited, and it follows this woman whose favorite garden gnome has gone missing. She thinks that someone has like stolen it or torn it apart or something, and so her housekeeper decides to solve the mystery of what happened to the garden gnome, and it was just a lot of fun. It was really cute and really quick, and I had a good time reading it. I read A December Bride by Denise Hunter. This one is another one that I really enjoyed. It was another highlight for December. I'd never read a Denise Hunter book before, but I really enjoyed her writing. I thought that the plot works really well. It was like a friends to enemies to friends to lovers type thing. And I really enjoyed both of the characters in this one, and they sort of have like a fake relationship going on. The girl in this book is like an interior decorator, and she wants to stage homes for sale and work with this one particular real estate firm staging their homes that are up for sale. And this real estate company that she wants to work for is run by this really like snooty type guy, and somehow they come up with the story that she's engaged with this other guy who's pretty well known in town, but that she has sort of a past with. And so she decides that she has to run with this fake engagement in order to be able to get this deal with this real estate company that she wants. And it's just really cute. So, you know, they have to spend a lot of time together pretending like they're engaged, and they stage his house for like a Christmas home tour. It was just a lot of fun. The characters were great. The writing was great. I'm really looking forward to reading more by Denise Hunter. I read Christmas Road Trip by Amelia Sinclair. This was another really cute one, and this worked for the road trip prompt of the Create Your Own Holiday Adventure. This follows 2 people who are stranded at an airport because of a big storm. Their flight, like all the flights have been shut down, and so they decide to drive across country back to their hometowns, which are on the East Coast. I think they were in Colorado, if I remember correctly. Or maybe they were in Utah. I don't know. I can't remember exactly where they were when they started, but they just happened to both be, you know, at the same like waiting area, and they strike up this conversation, and the guy's like, you know, I'm actually going to drive across country. Do you want to come with me? And it turns out that they end up having some mutual friends in common from college. And so they decide to drive across country together, and it's really cute. They build a relationship and learn a lot more about each other. I almost wish that it had been a little bit longer. It could have been more fleshed out and could have been made into a longer story, but it was probably perfect for what it was though. And if you're looking for like a road trip romance, I would definitely check this one out. Then I read Booked for Christmas by Lily Manon. So this is another hate to love romance. And this one is about a writer, and she is having like a big Christmas party at her like her vacation cabin that's up in the mountains or whatever. And for some reason, her biggest critic shows up at this birthday party. He was like invited by one of her friends, but she didn't know. He's like written terrible reviews of her books. And of course, everybody ends up getting snowed in. at the party. Well, actually, it starts to snow, and all of her friends somehow book it out of there, and then the only two people left are her and her biggest critic, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. But still, I thought it was cute, and they had a lot of witty banter, but then it just sort of dissolved into like a whole bunch of like hokiness at the end. I really didn't like the ending, and it sort of ruined the whole entire book for me. But this author is actually Sonia Menon, who wrote When Dimple Met Rishi and all of those other books. And so she's writing adult romance under Lily Menon now. And I would be interested in reading more from her. I think her writing is good. It's just, I don't know. There was something about the way this whole plot like dissolved into ridiculousness that just didn't do it for me. I think those are all of the Christmas books. Okay, so then after that, I read 5 other books that were from the Amazon Stories collection, which I have tried out their stories collections before and I've enjoyed them. And I saw that they had just put out this fairy tale collection. It had been being advertised on Instagram a bunch, and so I decided to go ahead and check it out. There are 5 different stories written by popular YA author, and I think that the collection is called the Faraway series, if I'm not mistaken. So I read all 5 of these. The first one was The Prince and the Troll by Rainbow Rowell. This one was the worst one of the entire collection. It didn't make any sense at all. It was super duper weird, and when I got done, I was like, oh, what did I just read? I don't even know. I think that it was supposed to be telling some sort of moral. Other reviewers were saying that it was supposed to be about climate change. When I was reading it, I felt like maybe it was supposed to be telling some sort of statement about like technology, but I really don't know. It was really weird. Then the second one was Hazel and Gray by Nick Stone. This one I gave 3 stars to. Obviously this is supposed to be a retelling of Hansel and Gretel, and it is about these 2 teenagers who end up lost in the woods, and they stumble upon this big white house, and they go inside to like try to use the phone or get some food or something, and they discover that really it's like a sex trafficking place, which was so unexpected for me. Like, I was not expecting these fairy tale retellings to be so dark and twisted, but this one was super, super dark and very disturbing. I feel like it was well written and it had potential. I just was like so shocked by how dark it was. Okay, then the third one was The Princess Game by Saman Chinani, and this one is tied for the best one for me. I gave 2 of these 4 stars, and there was this one, The Princess Game, definitely deserved 4 stars. This is more of like a murder mystery. It's about this prestigious high school where a whole bunch of girls are being killed, and they're being killed and like posed in the manner of different fairy tale princesses. And so you're following 2 police officers who have been working undercover at the school in order to solve the mystery. And it was just a lot of fun. I don't know if it was like the dynamics or the mystery or the way that it was told. It was just one of the best ones out of the collection. Then the 4th one was called The Cleaners by Ken Liu. This one is about a man who cleans objects that have like memory deposits on them. So in this world, it's like anything that you touch or use, or even if it's in the same room as you, it just like collects your memories and your emotions. And so sometimes when they get really built up with those type of things, people want to get them cleaned to get like the bad memories off of them, which I thought was a really interesting concept. I just felt like it could have been explained a little bit more, and maybe the story could have been a little bit longer and it would have been more effective. Then the last one is called The Wickeds by Gail Foreman. This one was about 3 wicked queens from 3 different fairy tale stories, and I really enjoyed this one. So you sort of got a look into why they did what they did and how they're feeling about it. It was just really, really interesting. The 3 of them kind of bond together and go on this journey. They think that they are going to go and like stick it to the princesses for what they did to them and how they made them look bad and how everybody hates them whenever what they did really wasn't bad when, you know, you see it from their side. It was really interesting. I really enjoy a good villain backstory. Okay, Then the last three things that I read this month are three more physical books here. I finally read the first two volumes of Descender that we have here at our house. We've had these for quite some time, and my husband actually read them years ago when they came out, and he finally convinced me to go ahead and read them. And I needed to read the rest like right away. I love these so much. I knew that I would. This is a sci-fi futuristic series that is about robots basically, and it's mostly following this one little companion robot who was built to look like a little boy and basically be a companion to a child to sort of look after the boy whenever his parents couldn't be around. This huge apocalyptic event has happened, and it happened while the robot was put to sleep, and so he wakes up years later and he is the only person left on this planet that he was living on with his family, and it just goes on from there. It was so good. I loved it so much. Tim has my heart, the little robot. I love him so much. And then the second one was just as good, and it ended on like a big cliffhanger, so I definitely need to read the next volume as soon as possible. I really hope I have time to read it in January. So if you ever are into sci-fi, I mean at all, I would just really, you should just pick these up. They're just so good. I can't say enough good things about them. You will fall in love with Tim, the little boy robot. Yeah. And the very last thing that I read in December, and the last thing I read in 2020, my throat is hurting from talking for so long, is The Viscount and the Vicar's Daughter by Mimi Matthews. So I've had this for a while on my shelves, and I have enjoyed everything that I have read by Mimi Matthews, and I have this desire to read all of her stuff, her entire backlist. So I knew I could squeeze this in, and I finally did squeeze it into like the last couple of days of December. But I will say that this is my least favorite book that I have read of hers, which was so surprising. I expected to love this, and not that it wasn't good. Her writing is still wonderful. She's just such a great writer, and I really fall into her stories and just enjoy every single word. I love her settings. There's just something very atmospheric and dreamy about her books. This is set during a Victorian time period in England, and it follows this young woman whose father has died, and she is sort of left destitute. She doesn't have any family, and so she is working as like a lady's companion, and for not a very nice lady actually. And while she's at this house party with the woman that she works for, she meets this Viscount who is sort of like a rogue, a rake, someone who has a really bad reputation in society, and they sort of strike up a friendship, I guess you would call it, and it follows their romance essentially. I mean, you know where this is going, right? So my main issue with why I didn't love this one as much as her other books is that this one has insta-love in it, and it is just hardcore insta-love that I loved both of the characters in the book, although I will say that the main male character was a bit whiny and immature. He was supposed to be 32 years old, but a lot of the way that he talked and acted just didn't seem like he was 32 years old, so he kind of got slightly annoying at points. And then, of course, like I said, the insta-love. Sometimes I'm okay with insta-love if it's done well, and not that this was done badly. I would still recommend this book. It's just that insta-love is it's not my favorite thing, and the way it was done in here, I felt like it was so rushed that I didn't have time to like be fully invested in their relationship. I, of course, wanted them to get together. I just didn't feel all of the feels that I normally feel with Mimi Matthews. I just said feel a whole lot of times. But I still love her writing, and I still plan on reading everything that she has written. So those are all of the books that I read during the month of December. If you have read any of these, I would love to know what you thought about them. Do you agree with me or disagree? Let's definitely chat about all of the bookish things down in the comments. I hope that you had a really great December, and I hope that your 2020 was as good as it could possibly be, given the circumstances that we were all going through during 2020. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're all doing well, and I will see you next time.